I would like to express my respect and gratitude to all members of the United Nations and staff of the UN Secretariat for their contribution to world peace and shared prosperity. I extend my sincere congratulations to Her Excellency Annalena Baerbock on assuming the presidency of the 80th session of the UN General Assembly. I also pay tribute to Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his unwavering dedication and hard work. I hope the 80th session of the UN General Assembly will achieve even more meaningful results under their outstanding leadership. Madam President, Mr. Secretary, and distinguished delegates, this year is a meaningful year marking the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. The past 80 years of the UN have been a valuable journey of protecting the dignity and values of humanity and at seeking a path forward for future generations. If someone asks what the UN has achieved, I would confidently reply, look at the 80-year history of the Republic of Korea. It is no exaggeration to say that the Republic of Korea's history, dotted with challenges and responses, is the history of the United Nations, which has constantly confronted enormous challenges facing humanity. Liberated from colonial rule the very year that the United Nations was founded, the Republic of Korea emerged from the scars of division and ashes of war through UN assistance, maintaining national identity while achieving industrialization and blooming into a democracy. Therefore, the Republic of Korea in itself is a country that has proven the value of the UN's existence. Whenever the Republic of Korea revived the hopes of lives as precious as the weight of the universe amidst horrific wars and disasters, the UN flag fluttered at the center of that intense solidarity. The United Nations has strived to provide equal rights and opportunities to everyone without discrimination, and has provided education and vaccines to make children's lives blossom. The small country in the East, which rose with the support of the UN and the international community, has become a proud UN member that is drawing the world's attention. It is raising its role and responsibility as a member of the international community more rapidly than any other country. There were times when democracy and peace were in crisis, but each time, the Republic of Korea rose with indomitable strength. Even a safe coup could not break the people of the Republic of Korea's strong will, desiring democracy and peace. The revolution of light that the people of the Republic of Korea achieved against the darkness of the insurrection last winter was a historic moment that demonstrated the brilliant achievement of the UN spirit. The remarkable resilience and strength of democracy that the Republic of Korea has shown will be ours as well as that of the entire world. I need you to take my hand and guide me away from all this, away to where the light shines through, to where the flowers bloom. As the novelist Han Gang, laureate of the Nobel Prize in Literature, wrote, the Republic of Korea will be a milestone of light for all those who join the journey toward democracy. Today, at the UN General Assembly, where world peace and humanity's shared prosperity is discussed, I proudly announce that a new Republic of Korea, which will be a beacon of light for global citizens, has completely returned to the international community. Thank you. The Republic of Korea, which has grown thanks to the support and assistance of the UN, will not hesitate to take on the role of a leading nation, generously sharing its experience and history of restoring democracy. Despite ceaseless efforts from all corners of the world, the international community's determination and aspiration to maintain international peace and security 80 years ago still remains an unfinished task for everyone. 280 million people are still in a state of extreme hunger. Armed conflicts around the world, including in Ukraine and the Middle East, as well as the climate crisis, which has already become a real problem, threaten the survival of humanity. The answer lies in the wisdom of the pioneers who founded the United Nations, as well as the path that the people of the Republic of Korea demonstrated. There is only one way: more democracy. The people-centered government of the Republic of Korea, through the power of collective intelligence, is ceaselessly attempting innovations, seeking better alternatives in democracy. The way to solve common challenges facing the international community is no different. When all the countries experiencing the same problems gather here at the United Nations and continue multilateral cooperation, putting their heads together, we will all be able to move toward a bright future of peace and prosperity. I look forward to the UN 80 initiative presented by the Secretary General taking root as a vision that achieves UN's evolution and advancement in line with the demands of our time. I also hope the UN Security Council can increase the number of seats of non-permanent members reflecting changes in the international environment and enhance its effectiveness and representation. As a member of the UN Security Council for the term 2024 to 2025, the Republic of Korea is making efforts so that the UN Security Council can respond proactively to threats to the international peace and security. Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, and distinguished delegates, the Republic of Korea, having restored democracy, dreams of a better future. The Republic of Korea will fulfill its responsibility as a responsible global power that steadfastly upholds the values of freedom, human rights, inclusiveness, and solidarity championed by the United Nations. We will further develop our institutions and cultures so that everyone residing in the Republic of Korea, both nationals and foreigners, can be respected as an equal member of society in all fields of life. The Republic of Korea will strengthen and lead cooperation with the international community while realizing the value of respect for human rights. In a time of crisis where immediate survival is urgent, words like solidarity, coexistence, and cooperation may feel somewhat distant. However, humanity has always dreamed of hopes as high as its deep despair and has achieved the progress we see today through a passion for a better tomorrow. The more difficult the times are, the more we must return to the basic spirit of the UN, which is trust in universal values of humankind. Just as the determination to not pass down the devastation of wars led to the founding of the UN and has prevented conflicts and preserved peace, we today must cooperate more, trust more, and join hands more firmly in order to build a better future, a better world for future generations. Democratic Korea will lead the way in multilateral cooperation toward a sustainable future.
Peace is a value that is more important than anything else. In the Republic of Korea, as well as elsewhere in the world, peace is the basic foundation for democracy and economic development. The disputes and conflicts we are currently facing vividly show how easily the ideals of human dignity and sustainable development can crumble without peace. Today, the Republic of Korea is fulfilling its responsibility as a key contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping and peacebuilding activities. Our brave soldiers, who have steadfastly defended the Republic of Korea, a divided nation, are helping to pave the way towards sustainable peace led by the UN. Threats to peace are not only physical elements. In an era where artificial intelligence technology is critical to security capabilities and cyber attacks threaten national security, we must confront not only visible enemies, but also invisible enemies. If we passively let ourselves be dragged along by the changes of the AI era, we will meet a dystopia of deepening polarization and inequality, unable to shake off the dark shadows of human rights abuses caused by the misuse of technology. However, if we proactively respond to these changes, we can use the high productivity as a driving force to build a foundation for innovation and prosperity and create a useful base for strengthening direct democracy. I hope the open debate that I will preside over as UN Security Council President tomorrow will significantly contribute to the international community's efforts to promote the responsible use of AI. Furthermore, we intend to share our vision for the future of AI through the APEC AI initiative at the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, which will be held in Gyeongju, Korea next month. We will strive to ensure that the vision of AI for all, where advances in cutting-edge technology contribute to the universal values of humanity, becomes a new normal for the international community. AI-driven technological innovations will be an important new tool for solving global challenges like the climate crisis. Over the past 80 years, the United Nations has paved the way for sustainable development and spearheaded efforts to address climate crisis threatening the survival of humanity. Nations around the world must respond to these efforts. The Republic of Korea is pursuing a great energy transition, leveraging science and technology and digital innovation to increase energy efficiency and expand the share of renewable energy. We will submit a responsible, nationally determined contribution within this year, joining the united will of the international community. At the 4th UN Ocean Conference that will be co-hosted by the Republic of Korea and Chile in 2028, we will also work to build substantive solidarity for the sustainable development of oceans. Such efforts by the Republic of Korea to actively address global challenges are based on a firm commitment to fulfilling humanity's shared promise of sustainable development. Since the United Nations established the Sustainable Development Goals 10 years ago, the international community has made much progress in eradicating poverty and reducing inequality. However, the demand for development financing is continuously increasing, and the most vulnerable are still suffering. Let us squarely face this grave reality and create new momentum for change. We must move toward structurally reforming global development governance while enhancing the quality of financial resources. I trust that we will pull together in order to bring about more cases like the Republic of Korea growing and developing from an aid recipient country to an aid donor country. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, as well as the 80th anniversary of the division of the Korean Peninsula. New challenges, as well as unresolved tasks, await us. Democratic Korea will begin a new journey toward peaceful coexistence and shared growth on the Korean Peninsula. The first step will be to restore broken inter-Korean trust and shift to a stance of mutual respect. The government of the Republic of Korea clearly reaffirms that it respects the North's current system, that it will not pursue any form of unification by absorption, and that it has no intention of engaging in hostile acts. Based on these three principles, we intend to end the vicious cycle of unnecessary inter-Korean military tension and hostile acts. That is a reason why we have proactively taken measures, including halting the launch of leaflets and suspending broadcasts toward the North. Going forward, the government of the Republic of Korea will consistently seek a path to reduce military tensions and restore inter-Korean trust. The most certain peace is a state where there is no need to fight. Through comprehensive dialogue centered on exchange, normalization, and denuclearization, in other words, END, we must end the era of hostility and confrontation on the Korean Peninsula and usher in a new era of peaceful coexistence and shared growth. The fact that exchanges and cooperation are a shortcut to peace is a timeless lesson demonstrated by the history of fraught inter-Korean relations. By gradually expanding inter-Korean exchanges and cooperation, we will pave the way for sustainable peace on the Korean Peninsula. It is crucial for both the ROK and the DPRK, as well as the international community, to work together to establish peace on the Korean Peninsula. While striving to advance inter-Korean relations, we will provide our active support and cooperation for efforts to normalize relations with the international community, including between the United States and the DPRK. Denuclearization is undoubtedly a grave task, but it is time to seek realistic and rational solutions based on a cool-headed perception that denuclearization cannot be achieved in the short term. The international community must gather its wisdom in a pragmatic and phased solution, beginning with a stop in the sophistication of nuclear and missile capabilities, going through a reduction process, and reaching dismantlement. Realizing lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula would present new hope and possibility to humanity suffering from conflict. The Republic of Korea will end the Cold War in the Korean Peninsula through the END initiative and fulfill its responsibility and role to contribute to world peace and prosperity. A future where people from different nations cooperate and overcome global challenges together may sound like a rosy, dream-like vision. However, this is by no means an impossible dream. Peace is not merely the absence of armed conflict, but the realization of a community where differences are respected and people coexist. As long as respect and aspiration for diversity is inside us, we can always unite and embrace one another. K-culture is connecting people all over the world beyond borders, language, and cultural differences. The success and spread of K-culture prove that universal empathy is possible, transcending differences in all backgrounds. Gathering the energy of solidarity, coexistence, and consideration, the Republic of Korea, having ushered in a new diplomatic republic, is ready to move toward a sustainable future and a new page in human history. Though a difficult journey is expected, humanity has been able to grow and come this far by not giving up on challenges, even in the face of adversity. As the people of the Republic of Korea raised colorful cheering sticks in the face of a crisis in democracy, I call on the international community and the United Nations to lift the lantern of hope that will light the future of humanity. The Republic of Korea will boldly lead the way toward a new era of peaceful coexistence and shared growth on the Korean Peninsula toward a better
우리
future
대한민국이 맨 앞에서
together.
담대하게 나아가겠습니다. 긴 시간
Thank you
경청해
very much
주셔서
for your
감사합니다.
attention.
Assembly, on behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Korea. The Assembly will hear an address by His Highness.
That was President Lee Jae-myung's first address to the UN General Assembly. He declared new Republic of Korea and also laid out Korean Peninsula and North Korea policies. Let us now delve deeper into this speech with experts here in the studio. Joining us is Professor Song Se-ryun. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to join you.
Thanks for joining us. And also Professor Mason Ritchie, it's also good to have you with us.
Sure, I'll try to say something interesting.
Okay, Professor Ritchie, I'd like to start with you. How did you see President Lee's debut at the UN General Assembly?
Yeah, so there was a lot of for lack of a better term, I would call boilerplate. The sort of typical things that you would see a leader say. The UN is a good thing. At the same time, he name-checked some challenges, UN reform, environmental issues, obviously, peace issues, the sustainable development goals that still require more effort to get even close to achieving them. Obviously, he made South Korea stand out and try to sell South Korea. He name-checked Hangang. He name-checked K-culture. He talked about South Korea's contribution to environmental issues. And so in that sense, sort of exactly what you would expect. Beyond that, I think that there were two things that really stood out to me. The first of which was on the North Korea dossier, this discussion of what he's calling the END or the END initiative.
Right, we'll delve deeper into that later.
Yeah, it sort of recalls a little bit, I was here last year when Yoon Suk-yeol gave his address, which sort of recalls the audacious initiative towards the North that Yoon brought up. So here's the END initiative, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
In terms of how that folds a process leading towards, in theory, trust building and denuclearization. And then the second thing is, he's putting South Korea out there as a country that has gone through a process of restoring democracy. And there, I think, at least are two audiences for that. Probably from his perspective, the more important one is domestic. He's trying to send a message to the people in South Korea, notably especially his supporters, but also probably perhaps people in the middle, that he's going to be responsible for leading Korea away from the path of what he referred to in this speech, in some sense perhaps a bit provocatively, of course, as the self-coup that we know from December 3 of last year. So in that sense, it was a shot both at the PPP and at Yoon Suk-yeol, of course, and a sort of attempt to buoy his own supporters and perhaps the people in the middle and remind them of the value that he has.
Right.
And then internationally, of course, the world is experiencing a decline or a regression in democracy. And I think in some sense, he's trying to say that South Korea could be a model for other countries to sort of claw back some of their democracy, at least in his vision of things.
It was subtle but clear that he meant to send those messages. Professor Song, I'd like to hear your evaluation. Would you agree with what Professor Ritchie said?
Oh, largely, yes. I think this is a rite of passage for a Korean president and stand in front of the world leaders and talk about his visions. And he checked off everything. I heard everything. Boilerplate, yes. And lack of focus, maybe it could be a criticism, but there's a sense that the Korea can boast about those things. We can boast about economy, boast about getting back to the normalcy after martial law, and then there's a K culture, and there are many accomplishments we can do, and the fact that we can convincingly talk about those things and become a kind of a leader role for others. That's not small. I think it's something that we can boast about. But I think in terms of speech, he did fine. In terms of the debut in the international diplomatic stage, I think the next thing we would like to focus on is whether he does well with the hallways of UN, meeting with the other heads of state, although we don't have any meeting with the President Trump scheduled.
Not yet.
Not yet, but there might be a small kind of a
encounter,
brush
maybe.
of shoulders, maybe exchange of some, smiles. Even those things could be very significant at this point. He also mentioned the North Korea that the Korean president always does, and the END initiative, probably another thing that he came up with. The contents is a little bit similar to others, but him being a liberal president, maybe there might be some traction rather than the conservative president. So we'll see. I think debut-wise, the speech-wise, I think is fine. What he does next, and bring back some kind of achievements, some kind of relationship, some kind of promises with other world leaders. Probably that'll complete the scorecard when it comes back.
Well, why don't we dissect the speech? Starting with you, Professor Ricci, President Lee started off his speech by, declaring the restoration of South Korea's whole democracy. He obviously did that intentionally, right?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, he has a domestic audience in mind, and clearly wants to show, his democratic bona fides and that of his party. Vis-a-vis the People Power Party, which is of course currently also in disarray. So it's a chance to again sort of push them down even more and sort of sell himself as the leader to take the country forward. And then internationally, I think he is trying to also send a message that I think he sees it like a lot of other people do, that democracy is regressing in a number of places, and that perhaps this is a sort of way that South Korea can be a beacon to other countries, at least in his presentation of things, where as he refers to the sort of the people on the street can claw back some of the democracy that has eroded over the last years. So I clearly think that's an intentional part of it, and obviously the most of it's probably domestic. He wants to shore up his support here. All of these types of meetings have two audiences. There's the international audience where there's some agenda setting happening and selling your country and being sort of the country salesman, but then there's also your domestic audience, which for political leaders, especially in democracies, is arguably the more important of the two audiences.
Right. Well, then, Professor Song, I do have to ask, do you think President Lee's emphasis on, South Korea's restoration of democracy help raise South Korea's diplomatic credibility going forward in any way?
Well, I even thought that it's better not to even mention it. It was 10 months ago. It was a one-night event. I mean, it was big in Korea because of the trials and all those. But the world audience, they were like, oh, that happened? Really? I mean,
so many things happen overnight, over one night.
Even for us, it was a one-off thing. We don't even understand, still don't understand why that happened in Korea, in a country like Korea. So even mentioning the martial law and Korea in the same breath, I don't think it's a very helpful thing. I agree that
to remind the world that we went through the whole drama.
Right. I think that a lot of people had a puzzled look. Oh, really? When did that happen?
Because we have returned to normalcy already.
Right. We never left normalcy in my mind because we handled it pretty well in our system. I think it was for the domestic audience to a large extent. But
like Professor Ricci said.
Right. If we kind of push it forward, then we can turn the table around and say, President Lee, your vision of the multilateralism, following the UN spirits and all those, maybe you should show how he unites Korea. We are so divided ideologically, and there's so much bickering with each other, and he's in the center of it. I mean, now that he became a president, to give some sort of gravitas on his words tonight, he should show how he unites Korea and demonstrates it.
Right.
So that the basis based upon that capacity that Korea has. I mean, it's not just Korea where the division we see, it's all over. So in that sense, if you want to become a middle leader in that regard, I think that the next challenge for him domestically how to unite Korea and show that. See how this is how it does in K-way.
Of
right,
course,
to the
K-way.
world. Right.
Well, Professor Ritchie, I'd like to go back to what you mentioned earlier. President Lee Jae-myung's Korean Peninsula and North Korea policies, the END initiative, END, E for exchange, N for normalization, and D for denuclearization. What kind of message do you think President Lee was trying to send to North Korea?
Yeah, before I get that, I actually want to agree with Professor Song. I think that's actually a great point that, perhaps showing how President Lee could unite, South Korea is not only perhaps a useful message for South Korean domestic audience, but also again internationally. I mean, multilateral organizations are also heavily divided, and so there's you could also see there's sort of two levels potentially to that message. I think that's a great point. Yeah, the message for North Korea through this END initiative, the exchange part, the normalization part, and then the denuclearization part. If we want to sort of break those down into sort of three, the three parts of it. The first part is in some sense trying to build trust up front. That's the exchange part. So, as he said, stopping the leaflets and the broadcast across the border and that sort of thing. And then the normalization part indicates a sort of, long-term ability of South Korea and North Korea to coexist peacefully with each other. And then the denuclearization part comes at the end. And I think that the first part of that, North Korea probably is relatively okay with. Then the long-term normalization part, I think it's a little bit unclear how North Korea feels about it. And then the denuclearization part, clearly they're not going to like that. And they've been at pains over the last week to indicate repeatedly that denuclearization simply isn't on the table, period. And I think that there's a sense probably from the Lee administration that he wants to try to emphasize that it is still on the table in order perhaps to have some leverage as Kim and Trump perhaps begin a negotiation process, and to the extent that South Korea might end up somehow being a part of that, that there will be some recalling by North Korea that South Korea isn't simply going to enter into these negotiations if they are even a part of them,
right.
In a way where denuclearization isn't somewhere out there. But I think that's that last part perhaps that's most significant, which is right now the North Korea dossier is really running between Pyongyang and Washington, and Seoul is as a facilitator simply isn't as important as it has been in the past, and the Kim regime has simply shown no intention to engage with South Korea, and I don't think that anything in this speech is going to necessarily change that. Yeah, I mean, I think that the denuclearization part of the story, that he underlined on several occasions, and even eventually used the word dismantlement as a part of it, which of course comes from the original term CVID, complete, verifiable, and irreversible dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program. If you were to read it carefully, which presumably North Korea would, there is a little bit of daylight perhaps in which denuclearization or dismantlement could be framed within the larger context of global denuclearization, which of course also the de jure nuclear powers, the 5 members of the UN Security Council, are also under the Non-Proliferation Treaty obliged, to take steps towards eventually dismantling their nuclear arsenals as well. So there's a way to read dismantlement in that context, in which it's a sort of international law obligation that all states have, and North Korea, could find itself perhaps in some fanciful universe, in a situation where it could afford to also dismantle its nuclear program, if the other recognized nuclear states were to dismantle theirs as well. So if you were to really squint at it, you could maybe read this as a sort of global counter-proliferation argument in which denuclearization fits, and perhaps North Korea, could be convinced at least to sort of go along with that subterfuge for a little while. But at the end of the day, we all know what he means. I mean, he means ultimately North Korea denuclearizing, and North Korea simply isn't interested in that. And I don't really think that there's anything in this speech that's going to change that. And of course, we should look for both what the North Korean representative at the General Assembly is going to say, possibly as a response, and of course also the message that's going to come out of Pyongyang, whether that be from Kim Yo-jong, whether Rodong Shinmun, or any of the other outlets in North Korea.
It's an interesting point because right before he departed for New York, President departed for New York, he did have an interview with a foreign press where he said North Korea maybe could freeze its nuclear weapons. Is that a realizable plan or goal?
Yeah, so of course, it's in some ways realizable, and there have been agreements in the past that were on the table that might have accomplished that, but CVID or denuclearization, as we started to call it during the first Trump term, was always very front and center as the objective. And whether or not we're in an environment now where arms control, freezing of their program, and a lot of different contexts, and eventual steps towards perhaps rolling pieces of it back, or that limiting its further development, that could be on the table. But I would just note that just a few days ago in New York, we saw the Japanese, U.S., and South Korean foreign ministers come together, in which they again, all said that denuclearization is the end goal that they have for diplomacy and normalization with North Korea. And North Korea is simply not interested in that. So, in principle, it's realizable. There are lots of plans in drawers that get you there along a set of phased steps and action for action. Exchange between North Korea and various parties in terms of sanctions relief in exchange for various steps towards freezing and slowly taking apart parts of their nuclear arsenal. But those things, I think, have become less and less realistic as time goes on, and it would require really a huge push, I think, by the Trump administration and by Trump himself to simply swallow North Korea as a de facto nuclear power in order to even get to that minimal goal of freezing their nuclear program. And I think it's very difficult to imagine that. And the trilateral foreign ministers meeting in New York, I think, underlined that because, again, denuclearization was front and center in the discourse there.
Right. Well, Professor Song, what's your take on this END initiative or END initiative that President Lee Jae-myung has just proposed?
Yeah, I agree with Professor Ricci that the denuclearization has always been a deal breaker for North Korea. Well, what they're trying to do is to be acknowledged as a nuclear power. We have the nukes, and we're not going to make it go away because that's the only thing we got. I think that's the message. I think that they sent Deputy Foreign Minister Kim Sung-yeong to the UNGA. I think it is a kind of a signal that they want to kind of put their position forward and answer any questions or any kind of criticism on that. So END, when the D is in there, I don't think it's going to get much traction. And they shunned talking with South Korea in the past in the first place. They want to talk to the United States for purposes of lifting the sanctions or economic reasons, for security reasons. So in his speech, President Lee Jae-myung kind of putting those forward. That's what Korean presidents have done before, but never had much traction. I think that what is more important is to get some kind of dialogues along with the United States going forward. Maybe that will fall on the economic side of it, maybe some kind of exchanges, maybe some kind of deals. But even that, I don't see that of a big opportunity or a big hope on that.
Well, I do have to point out North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has signaled, hinted his willingness to, revive talks with the U.S. President Donald Trump. I'm afraid to say that Seoul may be left out, of possible Trump-Kim summit if that ever happens. Like, how can we prevent that we're not all left out and, have the two leaders do whatever they want to do?
Well, that's what happened with the previous presidents, especially President Moon Jae-in. He was cast aside, even though he made a lot of efforts on it. I don't think anything is different now. In Kim Jong-un's mind, I think his only way to do it is to talk to President Trump and maybe convince him that, realistically, North Korea will not denuclearize it. So given that as a fact, and what are the ways to get some kind of accomplishment points and get, President Trump a Nobel Prize. we talked about it before.
The obsession.
In that sense, if there is a talks to be had between the Kim Jong-un and President Trump, and if the President Lee Jae-myung has a role in it by making the talks possible, or have some kind of arrangement economically, security-wise, in putting forth. Probably that would be the only way, but that's the road that we have not really been able to go down, and there isn't a kind of a workable framework even. So it's a big challenge going forward.
Well, Professor Ricci, I think not all hope is lost. We still have APEC leaders meeting coming up in Gyeongju City here in South Korea. Is there any, do you see any upcoming developments between North Korea and the U.S. or among U.S., South Korea, North Korea leading up to the event?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. You know, I haven't myself heard anything about any ongoing talks that might be in the works, or a moment where Trump might again cross over the military demarcation line in the joint security area, like he did in 2019 after the failed Hanoi summit. I think the focus that we're seeing so far that the United States has is on Trump meeting with Xi Jinping of China. And I think that's probably where where most of the oxygen is going to be for diplomacy. In addition, of course, to Trump doing whatever it is that he does at APEC. He's probably not on everyone's top list of friends, considering what he's doing with economic relations and trade relations between the U.S. and partners and allies as well as adversaries. But of course, Trump's going to meet with Lee Jae-myung as well, and I think a lot of the effort probably is going into those two meetings. Is there enough time and enough room to set up something with Kim? Hard to say at this point. It doesn't seem like that would be the most likely thing that I would expect. And in addition to that, again, Kim has to want to meet. And if I were Kim after the statements that have come out of North Korea over the last week, where they sort of took a very small first step towards softening their stance towards the United States and showing an initial willingness, even if a very small one, to meet with Trump based on the good personal relations supposedly between Kim and Trump. Every time they've made that statement over the last week, it's been clearly conditioned on denuclearization not being a condition for the dialogue. And we've seen Lee Jae-myung mention it now both in interviews and now at the General Assembly, as well as I said, the Trump administration through the trilateral meeting with South Korea and Japanese Foreign Minister and Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, in New York during this high-level week or at the kickoff of this high-level week, again, underline the denuclearization is the ultimate goal. So it doesn't sound to me like North Korea would be getting the message that, that Washington and Tokyo and Seoul have heard what North Korea wants to say about denuclearization being off the table. So will that be off-putting for Pyongyang? I would assume yes, unless there's some back-channel assurances they're getting that somehow denuclearization won't come up. It's worth North Korea trying this because they're ultimately aiming for some type of de facto recognition of their nuclear arsenal, not de jure according to international law, but de facto. And maybe they think that they can get one over on Trump this time. There's no more John Bolton there to throw sand in the gears. There are fewer people around Trump who are bridling his instincts and some of his deal-making instincts, maybe something that North Korea thinks that they can use in order to try to push this over the line and get some de facto recognition. But it doesn't sound like so far they're getting very far with that gambit.
Well, speaking of Trump, I have to say with you, Professor Ricci, you did watch Trump's speech, right?
I did.
He had to go on for over an hour, right? He had to slam the UN for not fulfilling its job. He also talked about how an end to Gaza war is so necessary. What's your take on the speech?
Well, I'll just note, just as a sort of interesting factoid, the leaders at the high-level week at the General Assembly are asked to speak for 15 minutes. Trump blew past his time. So did Lee Jae-myung, by the way. He hit 20 minutes roughly, if I was counting correctly.
Accurate.
More or less. Trump blew past his time, which is not surprising. Of course, Trump likes to speak a lot and certainly likes to hear himself speak a lot. Trump was his typical gracious and graceful and magnanimous self. I'm kidding, of course. He was his typical petty, ranting, unhinged, rambling self. He spent a significant amount of time criticizing the UN, which of course deserves criticism, but again, you can be a little bit gracious in the way that you do it. He has no interest in that. He spent quite a bit of time criticizing other countries for their immigration policies. And of course, he spent a huge amount of time lauding himself for all of the wonderful things that he's done, very contradictorily often saying that he solved wars that are still ongoing, for which he then blamed the UN for not solving them. So there's also a lot of logical incoherence built into this as well. And then, of course, he found a moment to talk about some initiative on the use of AI and bioweapon control or something like that, which I don't know where that's going, where that's coming from, and where that's going. My guess is that's going to go nowhere. This was a very typical Trump speech, and it's more or less exactly what I would have expected, and I'm pretty sure it's what the rest of the world expected as well. So at this point, we've priced that in.
Well, Professor Song, now moving on from Trump, South Korea is chairing the UN Security Council for the 5th time this year and for the coming years. Now, with AI being the center theme for the open debate coming up, why AI? I mean, and how can South Korea play its role in, how to deal with AI more wisely, maybe even?
Well, I think the consensus is that the AI is big, but we cannot even figure out whether they are for us or against us. Maybe both.
That's the question.
That uncertainty poses the big threat, because they can end humanity, as some of the movies will portray. But at the same time, it has a great potential to solve a lot of problems with the technology and the ideas they come up with. So in this case, I think it's a fear of an unknown. In a lot of instances, and I think it makes sense to say that other than the physical, in addition to the physical threats, we have to deal with what AI means for the humanity and for the peace and sustainability and all those things. So I think it's a topic that fits in any setting. The Security Council, yes, in each country's the future plans, the social or economic plans, and also the technology and science. So it's a topic that you cannot say, well, it's not for you. It fits everywhere.
Applies to everybody.
It does. And I think it is important that there is a global governance of how to approach this thing in terms of research and the direction and what kind of regulations, if any, that we can put on so that the results that they generate is not for the use of those terrorists or other rogue nations, but for the benefit of the humanity. It's a very tall order, but I think that because the people who are advancing it are in the science field, the engineering field, and technologies, if we have some agreements among those companies in a high-tech area, those researchers in the field, and have some kind of a code of conduct and have a due diligence plans, I think there are methodologies that they can deploy. But I think it presupposes that there is a decision-making mechanism in the global governance sense. But going back to Donald Trump a little bit, he's against multilateralism. He's against the world order that was established by the time the UN was established, and the role of the international organizations. So it is a big challenge that he's attacking the very existence of UN and the methodologies. And we understand to an extent because those mechanisms presuppose that the United States have been playing a kind of a police man of the world, and being the kind of underwriter of a lot of economic systems. We understand that the strain that was put on the U.S., but his knee-jerk reactions and the way that he wants to solve that problem in one swoop is causing a lot
One package deal.
Right, a lot of issues. But I think in that sense that the Korea needs to increase the voice as a middle power.
Indeed.
And be a kind of an arbiter. And that challenge for President Lee is much bigger than his domestic trouble.
For sure. Professor Song, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for joining us early in the morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And also, Professor Ricci, thank you as always for your insight and your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
That wraps up our special coverage of President Lee Jae-myung's first address to the UN General Assembly. We thank you for staying with us. This has been Kim Da-mi. Goodbye.